The scientific and technological revolution of the period will lead to, among other things, the birth of television. It instantly becomes the most powerful mass media ever devised. The beginning of television goes back into the 1920s, but it didn't become a commercially viable thing until the late 1940s. In 1946, for example, there were about 17,000 televisions in America. By 1957, 11 years later, there's 40 million. That's about one per family, and pretty much every family except the very poorest had at least one television. They were more common than refrigerators. The reason television takes off the way it does is because networks are developed. And the original television networks all started as radio networks. So NBC, CBS, and ABC all started as radio broadcasting companies and then became television broadcasting companies. And in these early days of television, some of the more popular shows were things like Milton Berle, who was famous for dressing up like a woman and kind of acting silly. We see I Love Lucy, Superman, The Honeymooners, all part of the very popular early television programs. And, of course, the news. For many people, this began to supplement and then will eventually come to replace the newspaper. Television is driven by advertising, and sponsors are given a lot of control over the content. Many shows even had sponsors in their title: GE Theater, Chrysler Theater, the Camel News Caravan. And something like the Camel News Caravan would have enough control, Camel would, to keep them from reporting on things like links between tobacco and cancer. And so from the very beginning, television is very much in bed with its sponsors, and they have a lot of say of what's happening in the programs themselves. Soap operas, by the way, get their name because they started on the radio and continued on TV, but they usually had soap advertisers, particularly Procter and Gamble, because women primarily listened to them, and the idea was that women were the ones buying the cleaning products. By the way, you have to love the, I bet you didn't know Santa Claus smoked Lucky Strikes, but according to that ad, he did. And then, of course, there's just some amazing advertisements on TV from the period I just have to share with you. Here's one.
Busy you, in and out of doors every day. Think how much dust and dirt settle on your skin. And makeup clings to your skin, too, and clogs pores. That's why your face needs a thorough cleansing each day. And that's why cleansing tests were made by an independent testing laboratory. This same kind of dirt was made just radioactive enough to register on a Geiger counter. Leading cleansing creams, complexion soaps, and Dorothy Gray Salon Cold Cream were used to remove this dirt. The Geiger counter proved that Dorothy Gray Salon Cold Cream cleanses up to 2.5 times more thoroughly than any soap or other cleansing cream tested.
Yeah, so that's that. By the late 1950s, television is the top source for news, but it also pushes all kinds of products and fashion. Another impact of television is on sports. Sports become a major part of the American psyche because of television. We have all these shared events, these great moments in sports that everyone remembers, even those of us who weren't even born yet.
There's a long drive way back in center field, way back, it is gone! Brooklyn, but the Giants have the tying run at second base, and Thompson is the hit back. Thompson over there swinging. Back and throws. There's a long drive. It's going to be out of the lead. The Giants overcome it. The Giants overcome it. The Giants overcome it.
Due to its partnership with television, sports will go on to become one of the biggest businesses in all of America and one of our great national obsessions, kind of a modern-day religion in many senses. Radio and film, of course, suffered dramatically. I mean, who's going to crowd around and stare at the radio when you can turn on the TV and see the pictures that go along with it? Radio did fine, ultimately because of the car, but it was never near the popularity it was originally. And, of course, movies take a big hit. In the early days of television, movie attendance drops dramatically. TV in the 1950s and 60s brought us what they gave. They're black and white, of course, but what they gave us was an image of a white, middle-class, suburban, kind of Disneyified American family. Men, women, and kids all have their place, perhaps best explained by the really today, I think, disturbing title, Father Knows Best. It's very clear who's in charge of that family. And these roles, these kind of stereotypical American middle-class suburban family roles were really emphasized and hammered home through television shows. But TV also sowed the seeds of change. Those left out of the white middle class got a window into what they were missing. Some people saw Leave It to Beaver, let's say, and saw models for how they themselves should behave. But other people were watching that and realizing, hey, wait a minute, why isn't my life like that? Why is my life like this? And so that, and of course expanded news coverage, will ultimately become a tremendous source of upheaval as people begin to realize what's kind of really going on in the world. Another source of entertainment was vacations. The 1920s saw the paid vacation become kind of a standard feature in many jobs. And what that led to is travel. If you're going to get a week or 2 weeks off, why not go somewhere? In the 1950s, we'll see this taken to a new level. With the interstate highway system, which we'll talk about later, and the increased income generally, we begin to see people taking lots and lots of vacations. Vans and trailers become common. Here we see some Airstream trailers. Much of travel back then was to the natural world. People would go to national or state parks, and these saw a massive spike in visitors. Sightseeing, hiking, camping, fishing, hunting. These were very common and popular vacations. I know that my parents, or my dad particularly, his family, would go, when they went on vacations, that usually meant camping somewhere. Less so than it is today. Today, very often we're going to hotels and going to urban environments, but back then they were going out into the country. In the early 1950s, the federal government proposes to build a dam on the Green River and Dinosaur National Monument. This threatens a park called Echo Park Valley, which was very popular for many people to come to as a vacation destination. Now, the environmental movement had largely died after the failure to stop the Hetch Hetchy Valley Dam in Yosemite. But in 1950, a man named Bernard DeVoto, who was a Western writer, published an essay in the Saturday Evening Post explaining that this park that he loved was going to be destroyed by a dam. The Sierra Club, which had been fairly dormant in years leading up to this, rises to prominence as individual citizens demand that the park not be destroyed. And unlike in the Hetch Hetchy Valley in Yosemite, in 1956, Congress gives in to the public pressure and does not build the dam and does not build this park that so many people had come to love from their time vacationing there. And this is actually a significant step in the idea that national parks must be preserved, and a real stepping stone in the early days of the environmental movement.